This podcast is brought to you by Most Valuable Podcasts, leading the league in podcasting entertainment.
What's going on, real MVPs, and welcome to another edition, episode 10 of What's Your Fantasy. It has been an exciting day in the NFL on the trade deadline day. It was today at 3 Central, 4 Eastern, and it was a fun one, and we will get into that because a couple of shakeups that could affect your fantasy lineups and your fantasy rosters. But first, I'm Brandon Swanson. Across the table is Ricky Widmer.
What's up, what's up?
And before we get into all the fun and excitement, I will let you know that if you want to support MVP, support this channel, head over to patreon.com, become a patron. Patreon.com, I got kind of held up at the .com. I think I said it funny, so I'm going to say it not funny this time. Patreon.com and become a patron, and you can do that for just $1 a month or $10 a month. You can come on a podcast. You can come on What's Your Fantasy and talk fantasy football with Ricky and I. No one's done it yet, and I'm really disappointed. This is now episode 10. You should have done it by now because you want to talk fantasy with us. I know you do. Who doesn't want to talk fantasy football? Anyways, I'll let that be. Maybe next week. Also, if you want to get an MVP t-shirt, head over to mostvaluablepodcast.com. You can get one from the store there. Dave Oster is showing it off for everybody. And then finally, head to iTunes and give us a 5-star rating if you think we are deserving of it. And of course we are. Come on. I mean, we have to be, right? But head over to iTunes, do that, do the rating, give us the rating, and also leave a comment and tell us what you think of What's Your Fantasy and of everything on MVP. And now, Ricky, we can finally get started. It's been an exciting day. It was another exciting week in football. And was it a good week for us in fantasy? And as we always do, we'll start with you giving us the update of Week 9.
Well, Brandon, it was a good week, and the reason why I say that is we have beaten Team Riley by a score of 156.4 to 127.6. The reason why we won, Todd Gurley, I know he didn't get into the end zone at the very end. It's okay, Todd. We didn't need you to. We had 33.5 from you. Nonetheless, Adam Thielen, another 22.8 performance. Julian Edelman, 20.7. Will Fuller gets injured. He's out for the year, but not before getting us 23.4 points against Miami. And we win by almost 20 points on Team Riley. And how that shakes up everything is, oh no, I thought that, okay, no, the tiebreaker, okay. So I freaked out for a second because I did the math before the games were final of if we'd be in the playoffs or not. We would, and this is how we would be in there, is in our division, the East, Jake's team, Kyle's team, and then our team is 6-2, 5-3, 5-3, 3 of the 4 playoff teams. Then in the West, we got the Chi-Town Kanyes at 6-2. They would get the playoff bid. And now both Team Riley and New York Thick and Trunky are at 4-4, and we have a game lead on them. If the playoffs started today, Brandon, it would be us versus Jake, Team Neverman, in the first round, and we would have Kyle going up against, I'm going to see who owns these Chi-Town Kanyes. It would be Dallas. It would be Kyle and Dallas going ahead. So right now, we're looking pretty. Third in our division, but we're in the playoff race. We would be the 4th playoff team if it started today.
I'll take it. I'm happy with that. We're in the playoffs. That's all that matters. I don't care if I'm the top seed or the bottom seed. As long as I'm a seed in the playoffs, I'm happy. And
I got to tell you, I got to say again, Adam Thielen setting the record for most 100-yard games to start a season. I don't want to say I told you so again, but I think I'm going to tell you I told you so, and I made a good pick on that draft.
Yeah, Ricky, I am surprised. I actually am surprised that this is turning out so well. I'm really surprised it's turning out so well. Thielen's been consistent, but I think that we would have also been very happy with Tyreek Hill and fairly happy with Mike Evans if he did what he did this past week every week. He hadn't been. his point totals had been lower. Tyreek Hill had been a little bit better, but Thielen, what he's offered is consistency. And that's what his, 8 100-yard games have shown, 100-yard games and then a touchdown. I mean, he's Mr. Reliable. He is all reliable. That is for sure. That's what he's been for Minnesota. That's what he's been for our team.
No, exactly. And I mean, the thing about Thielen is I love the consistency out of him. And the big thing that we are going to have to think about for our team off the air is what do we do at the wide receiver position, because we have two, Albert Wilson and now Will Fuller, are out for the year. So we got to add two more key pickups today in our waiver pickups.
Yeah, that's tough on Will Fuller. But that helps us, I think, a little bit. We just kind of need Calvin Ridley now, don't we?
Yeah, but I don't know how Calvin Ridley, I don't know how to feel about him. I did some kind of sneaky maneuvers, and I picked up Tyrell Williams before the week because he's had 26.9 and 21.8 the last 2 weeks. And they go up against Seattle this week. I know that you personally feel like he's a little bit of a boomer bust kind of a guy, but 2 weeks of 20-some points, I thought, you know what, let's pick him up now before he has another week like that, and then everyone's trying to pick him up.
Yeah, it makes sense. It certainly makes sense. I think that he needs to provide more consistency. That's Tyrell Williams. He was really good in the season where Keenan Allen was out. Mm-hmm. And the only reason why he was good is because he had consistent weeks. The only reason he had consistent weeks is because he was one of the main targets with Keenan Allen not being on the field. Mm-hmm. But then last year, he was inconsistent, only had a couple of big games. And if you didn't have him for those big games, then he really didn't prove, to be anything worthwhile having in your lineup. And then this year, he's been pretty much the same until these back-to-back games where I know it's back-to-back, so that's actually something. Mm-hmm. Williams had before last season, he would have like a big game week 3. His next big game wouldn't come until like week 8. So they were really spread out. But back-to-back games, that's good. So I can understand someone and even you wanting to pick him up, but he just doesn't provide that consistent factor, whereas an Adam Thielen does, a Mike Evans, even though you know that with the situation over there in Tampa Bay, it's really, as you mentioned it perfectly in a tweet, dysfunctional. They're just complete dysfunction over there. I think they're going to be better with Ryan Fitzpatrick at quarterback. I think fantasy numbers are going to be better. Mm-hmm. Deshaun Jackson, he didn't get traded. I don't think he's going to want to trade if Ryan Fitzpatrick is at the helm, because Fitzpatrick was finding guys like Deshaun Jackson. He was finding Mike Evans. He was finding Chris Godwin. The guy who was kind of on the outs there was kind of Adam Humphries, where Adam Humphries, his percentage of targets was going up with Jameis Winston, who is a very mediocre quarterback at best. Since Jameis has come back, he has been very interception prone. I think that you're going to get a lot more scoring with Ryan Fitzpatrick. I think if he goes back to what he was doing before he was benched in favor of Jameis.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the last things I'm going to say about our team, and this is another one that's kind of like a question of do we start to put him back into the lineup? Lamar Miller, now that Will Fuller, that's our flex spot that opens up, even with a Mark Ingram who, I mean, I haven't played him in my non-PPR, but I mean, 12.2 in PPR isn't bad. Lamar Miller, he's the guy the last 2 weeks now, 16.9, 19.3 this last game, coming into Denver this week. Could he be one that maybe we slot into that flex spot this week?
Could be. Lamar Miller's been a guy who has gone and had a couple of really good weeks, like you mentioned. He's had a couple of good matchups. Miami has really struggled to stop the run. They also showed this past week that they also struggle against the pass. But that's been really good for Lamar Miller. Now, Denver's run game, I'm not sure. We've seen a couple of teams really tear them to shreds. We saw the Rams do it with Todd Gurley. We saw the Jets do it with Isaiah Crowell and Bilal Powell. that may be a really good spot to insert Lamar Miller in because he could have success against Denver as well.
Absolutely, and that's one that I've kind of looked at after this week and was like, all right, is that one where it's like, all right, he's getting back to consistency, or is that a Tyrell Williams where it's like, hey, you know what? We're going to either throw in which guy that is the best 2 weeks do you want to throw in there? And Williams has had more points the last 2 weeks than Lamar Miller. It's going to be interesting to see how we work with the Will Fuller situation, but I think we'll be okay and we'll figure it out.
Yeah, I think so too. But sometimes you almost want to ride that hot hand. Mm-hmm. Lamar Miller, the 3 weeks prior to him having 100-plus yards, he had 10 carries for 10 yards, 14 carries for 49, 15 carries for 46. Then he goes against Jacksonville, 22 for 100 and a touchdown. Miami, 18 for 133 and a touchdown. So maybe he has started to turn the corner in his veteran years. That's what Houston is certainly hoping for, and that's what fantasy owners are hoping for as well, because his 46 yards, 49 yards, and his 10 yards, that's not doing a whole lot for anybody. All right, so Ricky, we've got a couple of really fun things to talk about. It was the trade deadline today on the day as we're recording, Tuesday, and we had some shakeups. We had some things happen. For a number of years, nothing happened in the NFL. Nothing happened at the trade deadline. I still remember one of the biggest deals. It didn't really do much after it happened, but one of the biggest deals was Roy Williams going from the Lions over to the Cowboys. That was like one of the biggest deals a number of years ago. That was like, whoa. And then he got over to Dallas and nothing happened. I'm sure they're hoping that something does happen in terms of getting Amari Cooper. They're hoping that happens. But I think that when you look at it, you've got Golden Tate being traded from Detroit over to Philadelphia, and you've got Demaryius Thomas being traded from Denver over to Houston, where he will play Denver this weekend. And tell me what you think. What deal do you think is better for a fantasy owner who has both of these guys, or maybe one or the other? What deal do you think? What player do you think is going to benefit more? Do you think it's going to be Demaryius Thomas? Do you think it's going to be Golden Tate?
That one to me is a tricky one, and the reason why I say it's a tricky one is usually the first thing I would say is who's got the better quarterback. And yes, I believe that most people would say that Carson Wentz is better than Deshaun Watson, but it's not like Deshaun Watson is junk out there. He's a quality quarterback and can get his guys the ball. The only thing I want to kind of maybe lean towards is maybe a Golden Tate. And the reason why I want to lean Golden Tate is, who do you got in Philly? Alshon Jeffrey is out there. He was, after being out the first 3 weeks with his injury, he's kind of been like, some weeks he's got 8 catches, other weeks he's got 2 or 4 catches. So it really depends on what the game plan is there. You also look at Nelson Aguilar, which ever since Jeffrey came back, he's been more of a 3 to 6 kind of reception guy. You've got Jordan Matthews, who they went ahead and picked up earlier this year. He really hasn't been a guy that they've consistently gone to. So I lean towards Golden Tate because if you're a Golden Tate owner, you're sitting there going, okay, Golden Tate will now have a better quarterback. I'm going to say better quarterback. I know Matthew Stafford is beloved, but Carson Wentz is a better fantasy quarterback and a better quarterback than Matthew Stafford. And Carson Wentz is going to be able to get Golden Tate the ball. However, on the flip side, Demaryius Thomas, yes, Deshaun Watson is good. Yes, they have DeAndre Hopkins, which is the true number one. But as I said to you in a text message when the trade happened, I believe, like, if I'm a Demaryius Thomas owner, I'm happy with that because I feel like Demaryius Thomas can fit the role that Will Fuller had, and that's the whole reason why I think the Texans made the trade. But if you're also a Demaryius Thomas owner, you're sitting there going, okay, I don't have to worry because he's going to fit right into that similar role that Will Fuller played before he got injured.
And see, that's why I think that Demaryius Thomas owners are going to be happier than Golden Tate owners might be. And I, in one of my leagues, I'm an owner of both. And I wanted both of them so badly to get traded. More so Demaryius Thomas than Golden Tate. But here's the deal, is that Demaryius Thomas, his time in Denver, it was done. He was not the favorite wide receiver. That was Emmanuel Sanders, and it still will be. Now Cortland Sutton is going to be the number 2 over there, and we can even talk about the situations for the teams that they left. But they wanted to get more work for their younger wide receivers, which they've got a couple over there in Denver. And now Demaryius Thomas certainly becomes the number 2 guy on the opposite side of DeAndre Hopkins. Hopkins at 6'1", Demaryius Thomas at 6'3", another big receiver, a huge weapon for Deshaun Watson to be able to use. And there's clearly no other number 2. Demaryius Thomas is the number 2 guy. He will be slotted in there right with DeAndre Hopkins. And while everyone's giving Hopkins all that attention, you're going to have Demaryius Thomas obviously not wide open. But this is good, I think, for DeAndre Hopkins. This is good for Demaryius Thomas because people are going to be looking at Hopkins a lot, as they always do. And maybe Demaryius Thomas isn't going to be getting, their number 1 cornerback on him defensively. I think this is going to really help him to finish out his season in a good, positive way. I think that he could end up being a 1,000-yard receiver again. And hopefully he adds on some more touchdowns there. It could be a really good spot to use him in the red zone, as well as DeAndre Hopkins, like you said, of course, with Will Fuller done for the season. I look on the other side with Golden Tate. I think that things will still be good for him because Golden Tate, he can play any of the wide receiver positions. He could play on the outside. He can play as the slot receiver. He's effective from both, and he's a possession wide receiver. That's why people love him for PPR, because he could have 8 catches, only 50 yards, but he gets you 13 points. But here's the thing, is that Golden Tate is most likely going to be the number 3 receiver. You've got Alshon Jeffrey. You've then got Zach Ertz, and then most likely Golden Tate. Golden Tate's going to be above Nelson Aguilar in my mind, and Golden Tate might even be above a Zach Ertz. He may be even above a Alshon Jeffrey in terms of looks, because if you're looking to stretch the field, Golden Tate, he can do it, but he usually does it by catching the ball at 10 yards out and then streaking down the field for the other 50, let's say, for a big play like that. Whereas Alshon, you're going to throw it up to him for 50 and then 10 yards for him to get into the end zone. So it's a little flip-flop there. But I think that there's more people to look at for Carson Wentz for him to throw, where he's looking at, going through his progressions. He's got Jeffrey over here, then he's got over here he's got Ertz, then he's got Tate. What's the order going to be for that? Whereas with Houston, I think it's Hopkins, Thomas. Hopkins, Thomas. Over there, they've got Kiki Kuti, who we've seen is good. He can be that kind of possession wide receiver over the middle. Their tight ends over in Houston have been hurt. They don't really have an option there. They've got Lamar Miller coming out of the backfield. They've used him sometimes. He's had some more involvement in the receiving game, but I think that it's going to be between Hopkins, it's going to be between Thomas, whereas over in Philly, there's a couple more mouths to feed. There's a couple more people to look at.
No, and immediately after I answer the question, can I push here? Do I have to say one or the other, or can I give a push that I feel like both are going to be beneficial and that both can be happy? Because the one thing I didn't account for when I made the initial answer was except for weeks 5 and 6, Will Fuller and DeAndre Hopkins. So Will Fuller this season, minus week 1 because he didn't play, 25.3, this is PPR scoring, 21.1, 14.9, then the 2 weeks I said 3.5, 5.3, then 12.8, 23.4. DeAndre Hopkins, 15.1. Will Fuller didn't play that one. Then 23, 14.6, 32.9, 22.1, 17.3, 14, and 26.2. Yes, DeAndre Hopkins is going to be the more consistent of the two, but just because, Will Fuller's injured, he's out. Just because DeAndre Hopkins is the number one, Demaryius Thomas is going to have, I shouldn't say he's going to get his, but he is going to have the prime chance, the prime opportunity to get his when it comes to fantasy points.
Yeah, I think you're right. But he's certainly going to have, the reason why I think that he really gets a big uptick for him that I think will be very, very easy to see. Whereas with Golden Tate, I'm hoping that it's going to be easy to see kind of the uptick in him going over to Philly. It's that in Denver, like I mentioned, Emmanuel Sanders was the clear favorite wide receiver. He got the biggest volume share of the target. Demaryius Thomas, it seemed like in a number of games, he would just disappear. Like, where did he go? He wasn't getting targeted. He wasn't getting catches. He'd get a couple at the beginning, but he really didn't get a big volume share over there in Denver. It didn't seem like, especially this season with Case Keenum. Now with Deshaun Watson, DeAndre Hopkins isn't throwing the football, but with Deshaun Watson, I think that he's going to get a lot more looks. I think Deshaun Watson's going to really like having two big targets to be able to go to with Hopkins at 6'1", Thomas at 6'3", and Thomas is going to be a great fit over there, a veteran guy who has been in the league a long time, has won, knows how to do things, and he's going to be a perfect fit for this Houston team who's now on a run, a five-game win streak. They're leading over there in the AFC South. They need this. This is a great move for them, not just fantasy football, but for football, real football. This is a really good move for them. Get a veteran, a guy who, yes, isn't in his prime anymore necessarily, but a guy who can still play and actually was trying to be in possibly one of the best shapes of his life this offseason. And I think that he will provide a lot of good things for them over there in Houston. And it's so funny that his first game is going to be against Denver this weekend.
Yeah, and one of the guys I want to throw out there, and I was kind of just thinking about this as you were talking, is, of course, the big joke of the trade is going to be, hey, you go and do your own thing, you piss Aaron Rodgers off, you go ahead and find yourself traded to Baltimore. But the thing I'm looking at is with the Baltimore running situation, Alex Collins is a guy that's been inconsistent fantasy-wise, where you've got 12.3, but then 7.8, but then 17.4. You also have a guy in Javoris Allen who running the ball hasn't really been where he's been used. He's been used more as the passing option out of the backfield, which is why maybe in PPR he's been more of a sustainable option. I wanted to ask you, though, is this Ty Montgomery thing, if you are a Ty Montgomery owner, how would you feel about this move to Baltimore? Are we going to see an uptick in his numbers and it feels weird to say that because he's moving away from Aaron Rodgers, but are we going to see a little bit of an uptick in his numbers based on the running back situation in Baltimore and the change of scenery?
I actually don't like it for him. If I'm a Ty Montgomery owner, I'm worried because clearly the Packers just absolutely wanted nothing to do with him. They gave him to Baltimore for a 2020 7th-round pick. They literally said, here, Baltimore, you can have him. And Baltimore said, no, let us give you something. Let us give you something. And the Packers said, what's the crappiest pick you have in the next 2 years? Oh, your 7th round of 2020? Yeah, I guess we'll take it.
If they could have, they would have pulled a Billy Bean and said, hey, pay for my pop for the rest of the season. We'll call it a deal.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually, I think, where we were in terms of this trade with Ty Montgomery. But back to him is I don't like it because the Ravens, in my mind, they didn't need him necessarily. I mean, yeah, they have Alex Collins, who is the one doing most of the running. Then they've got Javoris Allen, who's doing most of the receiving out of the backfield.
Mm-hmm.
Baltimore, they get Ty Montgomery. His role is basically the same, or was the same on the Packers as kind of Javoris Allen's is on the Ravens. So they're just getting like a backup to Javoris Allen. I don't see where this is working. And I know in the trade, in one of the stories, it said that Baltimore gets much needed running back help. Well, they don't really need the help because they don't really run the ball. Mm-hmm. They don't do that much. Even when they're up in games, they don't seem to be running the football all that much. So it really it does not confuse me as to why the Packers got rid of him, but it does confuse me as to why Baltimore would be the team that would want to go get him. Ty Montgomery is this wide receiver who's been converted to a running back, but is still doing a lot of the receiving out of the backfield. And, Aaron Jones was the guy in Green Bay. Now certainly will be the guy in Green Bay, I think, going forward at the running back position. So pick him up if he's available and you don't have him. But with Montgomery, I don't think that this really is going to help his value at all. I think that it's either going to stay stagnant where it is or get worse. To be quite honest with you, I just don't see how he becomes some integral part of that Raven offense.
The only thing I fear, and of course there's only 47.5% of people that are going to be affected by this, but I look at it and go, if you are a Javaris Allen owner and you need him in some case to fill in for a bye week, or just I got an injury and I need to play him this week, like I said, he's been the guy that's been a little bit better than Alex Collins because he's had more double-digit games, especially in PPR, because he goes ahead and he gets more receptions than he does running the ball. I wonder if this Ty Montgomery move is going to eat up some of his fantasy production, where instead of, if I'm looking at the stats, let's say against Cleveland, instead of getting 6 receptions, maybe he only gets 3 receptions. And then his points go down from 11 to about, what would that be, -3? He's at 8. Or this past week, he had 3 and a touchdown. Let's say he only has 1 and a touchdown, and his points go from 10 to about 7 or 8, which I know you're sitting there going, well, Ricky, it's only 3 points, but still, those 3 points can be a lot, especially when you look at across the season. And I wonder how they're going to divvy everything up. The Baltimore running attack or that whole backfield, I'm not a huge fan of, haven't been a huge fan of, and this doesn't, to me, move the needle, but really it's the only other, today, the only other offensive kind of fantasy piece that has moved with the 2 wide receivers and then Ty Montgomery.
Now, Ricky, let's take a look at the Detroit Lions and the Denver Broncos, because those are the 2 teams. Golden Tate left from Detroit and Demaryius Thomas leaves from Denver. Now the guys left over there in Detroit, you've got Marvin Jones, and then you've got Kenny Golladay, who are going to be now the 2 starters on the outside, and those are going to be guys that are for sure going to see the lion's share, pardon the pun, of the work and the I guess the why can't I think of the word, the most of the receptions that they'll be, the targets is the word I was looking for. I couldn't think of it, but they'll be getting the bulk share of the targets. And then over in Denver, you've got this youngster Cortland Sutton coming up, a guy who is already getting some work, getting some catches. That's going to be a guy who is most likely now going to possibly work his way into the starting role if he isn't already, and start to get some more work there. Do any of these guys, do you see them? Is there one of them out of any of those 3 I mentioned, or maybe another one that you look at and you go, hey, this is a guy you may want to go after or trade for if you don't have him already?
So one guy that might be interesting to trade, so I've got 3. One's going to be one that might be interesting to trade for if you really need a wide receiver. I'm not saying go out there and trade for him for sure, but Marvin Jones, this has got to benefit him, because even with Golden Tate this past weekend, 30.7 points in PPR. He is now, to me, going to be the number one target for Matthew Stafford. The other one is Galladay, where the only thing I have to mention with him is you're a Galladay owner. It's got to be good for him because, I mean, yeah, there were before the bye week, he was consistent, like a double-digit performer. He was getting at least 4 receptions. He had 3 touchdowns in 5 games. But, like, ever since the bye, it was like the Lions kind of forgot he was there. He's only had 3 receptions in 2 games following the bye. Without Golden Tate, without those, let's see, how many receptions? Golden Tate has had, 11 combined receptions in the past 2 weeks. Those have got to go somewhere, and I think that most of them are going to go to Kenny Galladay. So for me, Marvin Jones could be one that you trade for, maybe. I know that the 30 is kind of like a pop out there. Before that was like 5, 8, 7. But yet again, you got to think Golden Tate's not going to be there. The other one, I'm going to throw out this for Denver. And this is going to be, you can pick him up right now. He is owned in about less than 1% of fantasy leagues. But I just want to throw this out here. A dark horse fantasy contributor, if he gets healthy, Deshaun Hamilton. Because Cortland Sutton, he's the main guy everyone's looking at, and he's only owned in 12% of leagues. If you've got an open spot, go ahead and pick him up because his production is going to go up there. But if you're in a league where Cortland Sutton is already taken, take a look at Deshaun Hamilton or hit that fancy watch button. On ESPN, they've got like, add him to my watch list. Add him to that watch list. See how he does after getting healthy, because the one game that he actually had receptions in, week 5 against the Jets, 3 receptions, 44 yards, 7.4 points. You go ahead and get rid of now Demaryius Thomas. Those receptions have to go somewhere, and they're not going to go just to Sanders and just to Sutton. There's going to have to be a third person, and if he gets healthy, Deshaun Hamilton could be the one that those receptions go to.
Yeah, I think with Marvin Jones, it's always been a matter of the guy's got a lot of talent. It's just, can he stay healthy? And he did last year, and he had a good season, and he has so far this year, and he's still having a pretty good year. I think he'll end up with a really good year here at the end of the 2018-2019 season because there being no Golden Tate. For Kenny Galladay, this is a guy that we saw some good flashes from him last year. And we're seeing some good things from him again this year. Certainly at the beginning of the season, we saw some really good things from Kenny Galladay. Now with Tate gone, like you said, I think he's going to start to get a lot more looks and get some more receptions. Whatever third receiver that they bring out there in Detroit, T.J. Jones possibly, I don't think that that's going to be someone that's going to take away a whole lot of looks from either Marvin Jones or from Kenny Galladay. And then when you bring up Deshaun Hamilton, I think that is a really interesting note there because, like you said, he was injured. He's someone with a lot of talent, can certainly do some things, and can be dangerous for that Denver offense. Cortland Sutton, that's just been a guy that's been talked about a lot by Denver fans, the media, for probably this whole season, the preseason, and even before that. So this has been a guy who's been talked about. It's similar to the Nick Chubb situation. Carlos Hyde was there. He was doing a fine job. He was doing a fine job in Cleveland. They trade him. They get rid of him. They bring on Chubb because they needed to get him more looks and more touches because he was too good to be on the roster and be in a kind of a backup role. And I think Denver's doing the same thing with Cortland Sutton. It was time to part ways, most likely, with Demaryius Thomas. And now's the right time because you have a guy right there behind you. It's not something where that you get rid of Demaryius Thomas and now you have to go and look and try and see, well, who do we have now? Who fills that role? Well, you have someone right there to fill that role. Tim Patrick, also a man who caught a touchdown this past weekend for Denver. That could be another guy who who gets some more looks. But I think this is going to be Cortland Sutton's kind of game now, and his role to take, and I'm interested to see what he can do with it.
No, and that's exactly why I say, Cortland Sutton's the guy, but put that watch list on, put that little watch on Deshaun Hamilton, because he could be one that could be a dark horse for it. But it's going to be interesting for sure to see how this does shake up the Lions and the Broncos fantasy receivers.
And Ricky, as always, have to throw in the weekly Le'Veon Bell watch. And Le'Veon Bell, as of right now, it's 4:57. I have not heard anything about him reporting and signing his tender. And as Adam Schefter had pointed out, he cannot be traded. He will not be traded. So now he really has no reason not to come to the Pittsburgh Steelers unless he just does not want to play football this year. I find that hard to believe. I feel like he does want to play football. He just doesn't want to get injured, and he doesn't want to be traded. One of those certainly will not happen.
Well, and the thing you got to think into
he's not going to get injured.
Is, I don't mean to cut you off, but the thing you got to get to is, I think it's coming up. I think it's week 10 might be the one where if he doesn't report by week 10, this defers to next year, and we do it again.
Yeah, that's it. It is. It's week 10, and if he doesn't report, there will be no Le'Veon Bell. There will be no $14.5 million for him this year. He won't be getting that. He won't be getting any playing time. He won't be seeing a field, and it will continue to be James Conner, who's continued to do a really good job for Pittsburgh, and then it almost muddies the water even more for when Le'Veon Bell does come back next season. You wonder if Pittsburgh next season would say, or even in the off season, if he could, sign something then or whatever, however contractually it works out, and then they still ship him somewhere else. Because that's what's been happening, is that with each week we get to see more James White. With each week we get to see the skills that James Conner. I'm sorry, James White. I was just
you were focusing on so much rooting against James White last night that you just had him on the head.
I had James White on the brain, but James Conner, James Conner for Pittsburgh. He has shown just the skills that he has. He is good. He is really, really talented. And that's hurting some of the leverage that Le'Veon Bell may have had at the beginning. More of the, you need me to come back. You know what? At the beginning, maybe they did feel they needed you because they didn't start off really well. It was a big distraction. Things weren't going well. I think there were problems in the locker room. It wasn't great for them. But right now, they're trending up. They are trending up. Baltimore is struggling. You've got Cleveland going into their struggles. You've got Cincinnati being exposed for the struggling team that they are. Even though that they won this past week against Tampa Bay, they won a close one. So this is a Pittsburgh team that's trending upwards right now. They're doing really well with James Conner, and now Le'Veon doesn't really have that leverage anymore of you need me. Now it's more of a, we'd love for you to come back. Hey, you don't, you do, you do, you don't, you don't. And he's losing his position.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see. I think he will report because I think he'll want to be on maybe a different team next year and won't want to deal with this next year. But we'll have to see. One more week and we'll get all of our answers when it comes to Le'Veon Bell, hopefully.
And now, Ricky, as we do always at the end as well, give me a couple of guys that you're watching on the waiver wire this week that in week 9 you saw them be just extreme. In week 8 you saw them and you're like, this is a guy I definitely want to go after. If he's not on your team, you've got to do it. And then also give me your guys that you're like, okay, I'm putting that guy on the waiver wire or I'm not touching him.
Well, I've got a guy that's for both. And actually, if you don't mind, I'm going to give you my answer, and then I got to throw something out to you because I've got a question for you and the MVP fantasy universe. The guy is Jack Doyle. Like, there's only one guy, and maybe it's because on my team, I'm kind of like, okay, O.J. Howard's going to start this week because Gronk, you've been diddly poo for me so far this year. I took you as the number one tight end. I should have taken Travis Kelce. I've even offered a trade for Travis Kelce that I'll even throw it out right now, Brandon. Tell me, if you own Travis Kelce and needed wide receivers, would you accept a trade like this? So I will send Gronk, Ingram, and Tyrell Williams for Travis Kelce. Would you take that deal?
And I need wide receivers?
You need wide receivers and running backs because your running backs are poop. And I'm giving you Mark Ingram, Tyrell Williams, and then Gronk, obviously.
Okay, so I'm not putting a lot of stock in Gronk. He hasn't been that great this season. Mark Ingram, he's had one good game out of 3 that he's been back. And Tyrell Williams, I'm not really looking at him as being all that great either. So no, I'm not doing that.
That's the trade I offered. Probably going to get rejected. But that's how upset I am with my tight end. So I've got Jack Doyle on the mound. He had 19 points in PPR. Non-PPR, he had about 13, which you'll take from your tight end. He's one that I'm probably going to pick a waiver claim on, but I'll have to figure out who to drop in my personal league. Here's the question, though, and I've got for you and I have for the MVP Fantasy Universe, is I've got a decision to make. And if Melvin Gordon doesn't play this week, this decision becomes a lot easier. Well, kind of. It goes from 4 choices to 3 choices. I want you to pick one of these guys that you would start. Latavius Murray, Calvin Ridley, Deshaun Jackson, or Tyrell Williams.
In place of Melvin Gordon?
This would be, right now it's for my flex spot. So if Melvin Gordon plays, he's my 2. If Melvin Gordon doesn't play, then obviously Latavius moves up into the running back spot, and then it's either Ridley, Jackson, or Williams.
I would play, out of those, I would play Latavius Murray because of the fact that Latavius Murray is going up against the Lions. The Lions' run defense this year has not been that good. They just allowed Chris Carson to get over 105 yards on the ground with a touchdown. The Packers had some success even in the little bit that they did of running against Detroit. They had some success on the ground against them. I think Latavius Murray can have a really good day against Detroit, so I would go Latavius Murray.
How about let's say Gordon doesn't play, Latavius is my running back. Who would you start in a flex? Ridley, Deshaun Jackson, or Tyrell Williams?
Well, Ridley's going up against Washington, and Washington's defense has been, minus the game against the Saints, they've actually been pretty good.
And they
maybe
add,
not from a
and they
fantasy
add
perspective,
Ha-Ha
but
Clinton
they've been
Dix.
pretty good. And they add Ha-Ha Clinton Dix. Then you had who were the other 2?
Deshaun
you
Jackson
had,
or Tyrell Williams?
Okay, Tyrell Williams. Who are both of those matchups?
You've got Deshaun Jackson going up against Carolina, Tyrell Williams going up against Seattle.
Yeah. I would maybe go with Deshaun Jackson or Calvin Ridley there because Calvin Ridley, he's been looked at a number of times by Matt Ryan when he's been healthy. And then on the other side, Ryan Fitzpatrick is starting this weekend for Tampa Bay. He looked Deshaun Jackson's way a lot when he was in there for those first couple of games. Deshaun Jackson had his best production with Ryan Fitzpatrick at the helm. Doesn't necessarily matter who they're going up against. That is who Ryan Fitzpatrick was looking at early and often.
Here's another question I got for you. I've got questions with my personal fantasy league all week this week. The Browns, they're going up against KC. I kind of don't want to play them. How confident would you feel in, let's say you had the Browns D this week, dropping them and picking up the Texans who are playing Denver this weekend?
Yeah, I would definitely do that. I don't think the Browns defense is going to be in the positives in points. I think that they'll certainly find the negative. And Houston's defense has a chance to put up some decent points against a Denver Broncos team that has been susceptible to turn the football over. Case Keenum has been pretty consistent in turning the football over this year for Denver. So I think Houston could have some success there. I certainly would not touch the Browns defense this weekend.
Done. I have put in that waiver claim, and hopefully if I want to pick back up the Browns after this week, I can do so. Yeah, but that's all my questions, because with my personal team, I have hated that I took Gronk. And, I shouldn't have taken him. I didn't know it was going to be like this season. Other Gronk owners are probably with me, but I am furious. I should be having at least 10 points a game from Gronk, and I'm not, and I'm furious because of it.
Ricky, Amari Cooper is going to be starting his first game this weekend for Dallas in prime time, Monday Night Football against the Tennessee Titans. You starting Amari Cooper?
Depends on who my other wide receivers are. If I really need, if you're strapped for wide receivers and don't have luxury, me personally on my team, I probably wouldn't, because I would maybe play a Deshaun Jackson over him just to see how he does that first week. But I also have Juju Smith and DeAndre Hopkins on my personal team. But if I had, let me pull up another team from our personal league just to give you an example. If I had Mark's team and I had a Josh Brown and an Alshon Jeffrey as my 2 and 3 wide receiver, then maybe I would go ahead and give him a look at that point. It would just all depend on who my other wide receivers are that I have on my team.
Gotcha. And Ricky, you gave me someone you do like in terms of Jack Doyle. Who's someone you don't like? Somebody staying away from. Somebody
that I don't like this week in fantasy. If I had to go up in it, first off, I'm going to say just don't play Gronkowski. I would just sit Gronkowski as long as you can. But the one that I will say is I don't like Mark Ingram this week. And I didn't bring up Mark Ingram on my personal team, although he had 8 points last week. This Rams defense, they are tough. And I would look for another option if you have Mark Ingram. I know Minnesota's defense let him get 8 points, let him get a touchdown, which was big, and those 8 points honestly were non-PPR. So in a PPR, he would have added 3 to that, so he had 11-something. But Mark Ingram is a guy that maybe I sit this week and don't play against the Rams.
The Rams defense, though, the time that they played Seattle, the first time they played Seattle, they gave them some pretty good rushing numbers to Chris Carson and to his backup, whose name I cannot think of right now. But they have some pretty good rushing totals on the ground to those guys. You still staying away from Mark Ingram?
I would. Maybe it's also because Mark Ingram, it's a double-headed back situation where, I'm not confident in the Saints. I think they could win this game. There's a probability in that, but fantasy-wise, you've got the number one factor of who's going to get more of the opportunities, Ingram or Kamara, but then you're compounding that with a really good defense like the Rams.
True. That makes some sense. The Rams defense has been good this season, that is for sure, even being a little bit banged up in the secondary. And the Rams also just did acquire a pass rusher from Jacksonville, Donta Fowler. So there is another addition for an already really, really good Rams defense.
And I think the Seattle name you were looking for was Rashad Penny.
No, it was the other guy. It was the guy in Seattle who had gotten some, who was playing when Chris Carson was out. He had a good game against the Cardinals.
Is he on the IR? No. Because I'm looking at their fantasy. Mike Davis?
Yes, there you go.
Mike Davis had no 100-yard game against Arizona.
Yes, Mike Davis. Mike Davis even had some good rushing totals against the Los Angeles Rams. So we'll see. That's going to be a really good matchup, though. I think that could be a shootout in that game, the Saints and the Rams, because while both defenses can be really good, we've seen both defenses be susceptible to some big plays. I could see a game like that of the Rams-Vikings game that we saw a couple of weeks back, where lots of big points being put up, lots of guys getting fantasy points.
Mm-hmm.
No defense was really getting good points there, but in the end, the Rams end up winning a close game. But it being, it could be like a 38-30, whereas I think in that game it was a 28-20 final score against the Minnesota Vikings. But Ricky, anything else that you want to add this week?
Not that I can think of, Brandon. I think I've gotten everything off my chest.
Good. I'm glad. If you have any more questions, though, Ricky, you know where to find them.
I have your number, Brandon. I'll give you a ring.
Well, that is going to wrap things up today for episode 10 of What's Your Fantasy. It has been fun again, as always, and we certainly appreciate all of you tuning in and watching and listening. Again, make sure you become a patron, and go to patreon.com and head to mostvaluablepodcast.com to get an MVP t-shirt in the store there on mostvaluablepodcast.com, and then head to iTunes and give us that 5-star rating if you think we're worth it. And let's be honest, we are. But again, thank you so much, everybody, for watching and listening. It's been another episode of What's Your Fantasy. Ricky and I always have a fun time doing this. We love doing it each and every week. So for Ricky Widmer, I'm Brandon Swanson saying so long. Enjoy the rest of your week. Have a wonderful weekend and enjoy Week 9 in the NFL.